fantastic radio reporter from KUT, which is the Austin NPR news station, and she does a lot of radio interviews. She is fantastic. Come on up. Ashley Lopez.
Thank you very much, Grace. That's very nice. I apologize in advance. I think I just started getting Texas allergies, so if I sound like this, it's the plants are out to get me. I'll win, though. My name is Ashley Lopez. I, among other things, I cover healthcare for the. Can everyone hear me, by the way? Okay, great. I cover healthcare and politics, but my heart really belongs to voting rights. That's stories I've been covering for almost a decade now. I grew up in Florida, and so I was around for the 2000 election. So that is right there every single time an election happens. So it's the kind of stories I like to cover. I'm going to talk to you guys about infrequent voters today. This is my target audience when I report on elections, because if you vote a lot, you probably don't have to learn a lot about how things work. But if you don't vote a lot, you have a lot of questions. Things change a lot, particularly in Texas. Thank you, legal courts and stuff like that. Things change a lot. But sometimes it can be intimidating, and obviously the League of Women Voters takes the position that people should all feel confident enough to vote and have a say in our wonderful democracy. So I'm just going to get started. A lot of my information and the things I'm going to tackle come from actual people who have questions about voting. We have this great project between a couple of public radio stations around the state where it's called Texas Decides. We ask people what their questions are about voting and the way politics work in the state, and then we answer it for them in these great radio pieces. But I went through a couple rounds that we had because they provided a pretty good snapshot of what people are thinking about and don't know about. So yeah, that's where most of this is going to come from. I'm not making any assumptions here about what voters don't know. This is what voters ask us, and this is what they tell us they don't know and they want to know more about. But first, why we focus on these, I think I kind of hit on some of this, which is that I think we're going to be getting a lot of infrequent voters in the next election. Oh yeah, is it hard to see? I thought it was just me, but I have bad eyesight, so. So as you can see, these are some pretty basic questions. These are starting to trickle in. People, I'm sure y'all have noticed there's a little more interest in politics and civics lately among the electorate. Everyone seems to be interested in politics in a way they haven't been before, which the next logical step is they vote. If you're kind of concerned about the world around you for the first time, you're probably going to want to do something that changes it. How bad is the visibility situation here? Just read? Okay. Well, okay. So yeah, I'm just showing you some very basic questions that we're getting from people because basic questions mean you don't really vote a lot. So this is why I think we need to talk to these people. And as I was mentioning, looking at some of the special elections that have already taken place, there are new groups of people voting for the first time, or people who haven't voted in a very long time now voting again. As we know, Democrats don't tend to vote during midterm elections, but they're particularly ginned up right now. So that means you could be having people who maybe haven't voted in a couple cycles voting again. So it's why it's always good to think of the people who don't vote a lot. Oh, there we go. That should be helpful. And we saw during the Texas primary that Republican voters voted in high numbers too because they're worried about a lot of Democrats voting. So there's just going to be a lot of new people. I also think maybe young people might be voting a lot more this year than ever before, and that is definitely an infrequent voter. Yeah, it's just my hunch. They seem very politically active right now in a way they haven't been before, which makes me think start thinking about young voters too if you're communicating to the public. Is that okay? Yeah, great. Yeah. 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 Yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. No, okay, one more. It was. All right, that's fine. Okay, sorry for this journey, guys. All right, so for what I noticed a lot in looking at like the sort of background data, the kind of questions we were getting, is actually really positive for a public radio station. People just want accurate and unbiased information. This is something I saw a lot. So if you vote infrequently, you probably aren't the same kind of news consumer as someone like me who reads everything all the time, every day, consumes my life. So you want something that you don't have to have a lot of savviness to read. Accurate, unbiased information. You don't have to like have a lot of working knowledge to know if someone's trying to pull one over you. So that's something voters are always looking for. And I saw this a lot, especially now with the rise of fake news. People are worried about that. If they don't regularly consume news, they don't know which is like the fake news or not, and that's become very politicized too. So, making sure that voters know this is accurate and unbiased, like coming from a place where I'm not trying to like sell you anything. I just really want you to know what's going on. That's really helpful these days. So like we try to do that all the time at KUT, which is like just put together a voter guide that's kind of like the things you need to know, not too much analysis, because then you get into the weeds of like, analysis can sometimes be a little bit subjective kind of. So that's something I saw a lot from voters who don't vote a lot. Here's just more examples. Yeah, this is something I'm seeing a lot too. I think a lot of infrequent voters are also dealing with a lot of distrust in our systems. Yeah, and I'm seeing that more than ever. It's getting to the point where I think they don't trust, at least they don't trust the machines. They don't trust the people who are running elections. They don't trust outcomes. Like there's just a lot of, the question I get a lot is like, how do I know my vote was cast the way I intended and that the totals reflect that? That is a very common fear right now. I don't know how, in a larger sense, we fix that. Like, how do you give people a trust in a system that right now seems really broken from the outside? At least, that's the way it's being portrayed, right? But I do think the more people vote, the more confidence they have in that system. And also just arming people with as much information as possible tends to give them confidence and tend to ease distrust. I mean, this is an imperfect system, but I think if you are really careful, provide unbiased information, try to be as accurate as possible, people tend to trust you and the information you give them. So this is something I saw a lot. A lot of, how do I know I'm not being lied to? Voting machine stuff. Yeah, this is a lot. And this is something we get a lot in Texas too. It's similar to infrequent voters, but it's people who move a lot. Let's start with, we have people who move within the state a lot and people who are moving to Texas because we have a good economy. We have, probably more people coming in here than other parts of the country. I think there's evidence of that. So, and Texas has quirky laws, like, I think we all know that. Like voter ID is something you have to constantly talk about because it changes all the time. And so people need to know that. I think giving them the most basic information is really helpful. Don't assume people know things because they often don't. Something that mystifies a lot of people is the fact that they don't have to register with a party. I get like 50 versions of that question. We get that question all the time. It's not something that's typical in other parts of the country, so sometimes you have to just like give them the basics. Like when you're talking to an infrequent voter, start from like the very beginning, because if they're from a new state, it's all different. Like imagine someone from Oregon who only votes by mail. You know what I mean? Like it's very different from state to state. And then moving within the state as well. Counties have, you have to re-register with counties, and all that whole bit, like it, yeah, that is a whole other thing, especially in a place like Travis County where a lot of people are moving there from other parts of the state. That's something we have to mention a lot every single time there's like a voter registration deadline or something like that. You just have to, remind people here is how you register to vote and how you vote and all that. All right, I'm moving through this really fast, but I did want to talk about this a lot, which is I'm seeing a rise. This was probably one of the most frequent questions I saw that mystified me concerned me every time. There are a lot of people who are green card holders who don't know that they can't vote. If the immigrant population right now is a little worried, let's just say a little worried, more worried than usual right now, and so the political climate has kind of gin them up and they're really interested in voting, which is great, but also not great because you can't vote unless you're a citizen in this country. That's just the way it is. And depending where you live, you could go to jail for that. So there's particularly in Dallas and Tarrant County, there's a DA out there who's like particularly looking out for this. So I think voter outreach and voter education when it comes to this could be important, just because I don't think that's something that's mentioned a lot. And I know it's not mentioned a lot because it's a question that we saw a lot while I was digging through voter-generated questions. And and it seems like it's pretty high stakes too. So I think that's pretty much for, thankfully all for the slideshow part. But, I just want to say that bottom line, I think we're going to be dealing with a lot of people who don't vote often, and voting is unnecessarily complicated in most of the country, including in Texas. And so it's important to boil down things really to their roots for people, like make it really easy, because when you have someone who's interested in voting, doesn't vote a lot, and they're met with complexity, that tends to be a thing that'll stop them from voting. I think, as in my work as a reporter, like I try to get complicated ideas and complicated problems and boil them down for people so they feel accessible. Because if it's overly complicated, people feel like they're being left out of a conversation, and you don't want that with voting. And I know that's always the journey for, groups like the League of Women Voters, which is let's make voting accessible and exciting for people, no matter how they vote. So there we go, questions. This is my I don't like extemporaneous speaking, so if there was anything in here that you have a question about, I'd be happy to answer. Yes? Yeah. She asked about disabled voting. I haven't done a lot of reporting on it, but I do know that disability rights groups are starting to get the vote out more, register them to vote, and increase the amount of like polling locations like inside like special facilities from them. So I definitely, that is important to me. And I mean, I think Texas's vote by mail system in general could be more robust, let's just say. That's definitely something. Thank you for flagging that. But I'm sure you all know more about that than I do. So, yeah, Grace.
Do you think that infrequent voters are mostly not? Are they concerned that before they get to the polls, are they concerned that they're going to arrive at the polls and then not understand that process? Because we're doing a lot of education on registration and the dates and get out the vote and the voter's guide. But are they concerned about when they get to the polls, what's going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, and it's also like you don't want to waste your time, right? Like, what if you get there? Oh, sorry, repeat the question. Oh, so Grace's question was, where is it that an infrequent voter probably has the most fear? Is it before they get to the polling location, or are they most afraid what happens when they get there? Probably they're scared throughout, or not scared, but concerned throughout. They don't have all the information they need until they get there and they realize, oh wow, that's a thing I didn't know that I needed. But I think that's a fear for everyone, right? Like, you don't know if did I bring the right ID for this. I think everyone could do a better job of like making voting less stressful once people get there. But depending on when you vote, that could probably be problematic. Like on election day is not the day. If you don't vote frequently, I'd probably not say don't vote. I'd probably say don't vote on election day. Try to vote early. But yeah, from the questions that I saw, Grace, it seems like people don't have information about probably all the parts of voting. Yeah, they don't know where to find information about how to vote when they get, like who they want to vote for when they get there. They don't know that, they feel like maybe paper ballots are better than electronic voting machines, so they have like worries about just the like equipment that they have. So I think arming people with information throughout that entire process would be really helpful, but that's just that's from what I saw. Everyone has different concerns. Yeah. Any questions? You seem, oh. Mm-hmm. Oh, thanks. Yeah, well, thank you, KUT. Yeah. Yeah.
So when it comes to college kids who have never sort of early 20s college kids who have never really cared about voting before, but now with the current political climate are really pushing to get into it but don't know how to do that, how would you suggest someone say a friend of theirs go about giving them information?
Well, this is a question. Oh, so she's asking about college kids, young voters, how do you get information out to them? I mean, this is something that I guess we haven't perfected, right? I mean, Rock the Vote has been going on since I was a kid. But I would say if you're a college student and you want other college kids to vote, make it an event. All go together, this is the thing we're doing Tuesday at 4, we're voting. And because I think once, make sure, go online and make sure you have everything you need, and then once you go there, you realize, voting, for all the politics, people who work at polling locations are there because they care about voting, and they are there to help you. Now, that is not always true, but that is not always true, but for the most part. And I think once people just get in the habit of voting and know their rights, and once they get there, that should be fine for the most part. But yeah, it's hard. I don't, I think about that a lot. I have a hunch that young people might be voting in bigger numbers than before this year. But never make predictions anymore about politics. But it's just a hunch. But yeah, I don't know. I think treat all infrequent voters and new voters the same by giving the most basic information, and everyone should be fine. That would cover everyone. Yeah. Let's start with Grace, yeah.
One of some research says that you're not supposed to talk about how poorly you vote, because that decreases the vote even more. Instead, and this is really important. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I haven't, but yeah, it makes sense though. If you're here's this party that no one goes to, make plans, right? Yeah, yeah. Here's that restaurant no one goes to. Yeah, yeah, that totally makes sense to me. I mean, yeah, and it isn't when we give context about some of the problems that Texas faces when it comes to voting, the fact that that's another point of why I think of infrequent voters when I report, is that we don't vote a lot here. So the percentage of people who are non-voters is probably really high here versus a place like Oregon. I always use Oregon as an example for stuff, but yeah, so, but you might not want to push it when you're trying to gin people up to vote that no one votes, Yeah. Oh, wait, sorry, no, she was first, and then I'll. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'll repeat it. So the question was about, so straight ticket is going away in 2020. And so, the problem is that there's a lot of like elections that people just don't even know what, like JPs versus, like appellate courts. So there's a lot of stuff that is going to be something that voters have to think about now for the first time that they haven't in a while if they've been doing straight ticket voting this whole time. It's difficult because like we're really interested in voter guides, and a lot of times we share the League of Women Voters voter guide because, when we think of our resources, sometimes it's just like not like you can't like doing a radio story on a JP race. It just like does not work, and so it's like a really hard pitch to my editor for that. So, I think having groups like the League of Women Voters who do like the grunt work of like, getting all the different, things listed. I mean, just giving people the options of like, here's what you will have, like here's what's going to be on your ballot is really useful. Just if they know, like they can Google, if they're really interested in that JP race, they can Google it. Yeah, I mean that is a problem is that we can't report in depth on every single race. But we do rely a lot on like voter guides that are put together by third-party sources like the League of Women Voters. And maybe that's something to think about. Since we're getting rid of straight ticket voting, maybe we, news operations could be like putting a lot more resources, maybe not in radio stories, but, just on the web, like giving people a rundown of everything that's going to be on their ballot. Yeah, but we have till 2020, thankfully. Yes. Yeah.
In Texas, if you don't vote in 2 consecutive elections, they can remove you from the voter roll. Most voters don't know that. They'll come back and vote, and they're not showing up on the registered voters list because they've been removed. So one thing we need to be telling people is if you haven't voted, you need to go down and make sure your registration is current and you get back on the voter roll so you can vote. And the other thing is we're not seeing Texas is one of the few states that really doesn't tell people where to go to vote. We don't send notices out and say your precinct has moved, you've got a new polling location, you've got a new precinct number, you've got some other situation, and the voter shows up where they showed up last time they ever bothered to vote, and that's not where they're supposed to be because it's moved somewhere else. And we do a very poor job, and I think it's incumbent on leagues or other groups to make sure that your county elections department or whoever's responsible for polling places is giving notices out to people that lets them know where they're supposed to go. It also would be nice if there was some kind of information that tells people when they've been being removed from the voter roll.
Yeah, I actually did see a lot of questions about that. Yeah. People are, like, the suspense list is something that comes up a lot. People don't know that they're, like, they've been on parole, for example. They don't know that they actually can't vote, and they've been removed from the voter rolls. Yeah, I actually did see that question a lot. And also, it got, there's a sort of political history, too, of, like, the way we purge voters from the voter rolls and how frequently we do it here in Texas. And it is on some voters' mind, but, yeah, it's not something that I think we talk about a lot. But, yeah, that's a great point. Did everyone hear his comment? Seems like most people did, yeah. Yes. Yeah, provisional ballots, yes. So he had mentioned that's why provisional ballots are important, which I guess some poll workers don't always know to have a voter vote on a provisional ballot if there's a question about whether or not they were improperly removed from the voter rolls. But I think it's arguable that provisional ballots are not an ideal way to vote if you indeed have the right to vote and should be voting. But that's a whole other thing. Yes. I don't have an opinion on that. She had a question about voting centers. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine it'll hurt, but I mean, I can't take like a policy position. Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's like early voting. Yeah. Yeah. And it should be easy in Texas since we mostly have electronic voting, so it shouldn't it'd be a low cost thing to switch to, but I don't take positions on policy. So, yeah. Any other questions? I feel like, oh, delightful. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I meant, but when I said that voters are mystified throughout the entire process. Yeah. Which is why I mentioned at the very top, unbiased, accurate information is what every infrequent voter is looking for because they do not want to have the background savvy to know whether or not someone's pulling something over them. So, one more? Yeah. Go ahead.
My question is back to your question. So on the voter guide, are you updating it for November?
All right. I think that's about it, right? Oh, yeah. One last one, yeah.
So my question is about the voter ID laws. We put out things about here's unacceptable IDs, and then if you don't have one of those, you can sign a declaration and show other people that I have heard from some organizations that there's a lot of concern about doing that statement of and showing not those IDs. Have you heard of any of that, or have you done any reporting on people having issues with that in terms of legal status?
I pulled, this is just Travis County, that's where I live. I did ask about how many of those reasonable impediment forms are signed. It's a negligible number, it was like a couple dozen. They're not getting used a lot, which I guess isn't fully surprising in a primary, right? People who vote in primaries, because this is like all the data we have now, is like the latest election was the primary. So it's reasonable to expect that people voting in a primary are not infrequent voters. They're people who tend to vote a lot. And the reason you're probably hearing their concerns is because the legislature added criminal penalties to lying or even making a mistake on those forms, so that the stakes for like just human error are pretty high. It depends where you live. If you have a pretty, let's say, vigilant DA, for example, like it's probably more likely to affect you there versus a place that's not really looking to prosecute voters. Changes county by county. There are 254, so who knows how many DAs are like that. So yeah, it is something I've been looking out for because we haven't had a huge election besides the general election, which we did hear some problems. As of late, I haven't heard as many problems. I figured during the general, like this November, that's something I definitely will be looking out for because yeah, it's a big deal. All right, I feel like I have taken a lot of your time. Thank you very much. Yeah.